Gasps filled the palace as King Charles did the unthinkable. He named Catherine the future queen, right beside a stunned Camilla. Cameras caught every flicker of emotion as Camilla's world unraveled in real time. What was meant to be a formal event became the most shocking royal moment in recent history, the day the palace trembled. It was meant to be another symbolic gathering, just another formal tick on the royal calendar. Inside the marble halls of Buckingham Palace, the Global Royal Council, a collection of Commonwealth leaders, royal advisors, and trusted aides, assembled for what was billed as a reaffirmation of King Charles III's position as head of state across the Commonwealth realms. The ballroom gleamed, velvet drapes, golden emblems, and the sound of chamber music floating softly through the air. Diplomats exchanged pleasantries. Royal aides moved quietly, precisely. The mood was ceremonial, until it wasn't. Without warning, the agenda shifted. Council members were handed sealed folders just moments before the king's arrival. Inside, a line that sparked confusion, then tension. A section titled, "Statement on Succession Positioning." What was this? A few delegates glanced at one another. Some whispered, others looked toward Camilla, expecting her to rise, to speak, to clarify. But she didn't. She sat still. Then, at precisely 4:05 p.m., King Charles entered the room. He looked weary, thinner than usual, but purposeful. He walked straight to the podium, nodded once to his wife, then addressed the council with the quiet authority only a monarch can wield. And then, he said the words that shattered decades of expectation. "It is with love, duty, and clarity of heart that I formally recognize Catherine, Princess of Wales, as the future Queen of the United Kingdom." The room didn't move. It didn't breathe. Cameras clicked. Pens paused. A second passed before anyone fully grasped what had just been declared. This wasn't an internal briefing. This wasn't a future plan. This was public, official, irrevocable. A royal proclamation disguised as protocol. It marked the first time in modern monarchy that a reigning king publicly bypassed his current queen consort in favor of another future queen, not in bloodline, but in trust. And as the room began to absorb what had been said, all eyes instinctively turned toward one woman, Camilla. The shock that froze the room. For Camilla, the moment landed like a silent avalanche, sudden, crushing, and cold. 1 minute, she sat beside King Charles, smiling gently for the cameras, nodding politely to foreign dignitaries. Her gown was immaculate, her posture flawless. She had done this 100 times before, played her part, weathered the stairs, kept her place at his side. And then, in the span of a single sentence, the ground beneath her shifted. "The Princess of Wales will ensure continuity, compassion, and strength in the years ahead," Charles announced. "The crown must reflect both tradition and transformation." The words echoed, sharp, final, irreversible. Camilla blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what she had just heard. Her mouth didn't move, but her jaw tensed. Her gloved hands, resting in her lap just moments earlier, began to twitch. Small, involuntary movements. Her shoulders stiffened. Her spine locked. From a distance, she looked composed. But those close enough could see the unraveling. One palace aide, standing discreetly by the far exit, would later describe her face as drained of all color, like someone had pulled the soul out of her. Another said it was the first time in 2 decades they had seen Camilla truly rattled in public. She hadn't been warned, not fully. Yes, she had known there would be remarks about the future. Perhaps a nod to generational transition. Maybe even a gentle mention of Catherine's increasing role. But this was a clear and public declaration of succession. It wasn't symbolic. It was seismic. And it landed squarely in the center of her chest. For a woman who had spent years clawing her way out of scandal, surviving headlines that would have shattered anyone else, and enduring constant comparison to a ghost, this was betrayal. In front of cameras, in front of the family, in front of the world. She had once been the most hated woman in Britain. Now, she was being erased, with a smile on Charles's face and the council's full support. Across the room, seated several rows back, Catherine appeared as surprised as anyone. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't move to speak or stand. She simply bowed her head gently and folded her hands in her lap, a portrait of quiet grace under enormous pressure. Her stillness only sharpened Camilla's discomfort. Photos captured the moment. Catherine serene, Camilla straining to maintain composure. The camera didn't lie. It caught the flicker of a forced smile, the rapid blinking, the barely visible shake in her fingers. She was trying not to cry. Not here, not now. But her body betrayed her. And so did the silence. The applause that followed Charles's announcement was thin and scattered. Polite, but not warm. There were no cheers, no ovations, just the sound of power quietly, irrevocably changing hands under a golden ceiling. Across the diplomatic tables, ambassadors whispered in hushed tones. One from Australia reportedly muttered, "Well, that's that then." Backstage, the palace press team scrambled to rewrite prepared statements. Everything had changed in under 5 minutes. Inside the palace, questions erupted in whispers. Had Camilla truly been blindsided? Had this been planned behind closed doors? And if so, by whom? Was this Charles asserting his legacy or surrendering to pressure? Was this the end of Camilla's reign before it had even begun? No answers came, only stunned silence. And as Charles stepped away from the podium, the shift was complete. He walked past Camilla without meeting her gaze. Not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't face what she now represented. The past. And Catherine? She hadn't moved, but she didn't need to. The monarchy had already moved to her. And in that crystal ballroom, under centuries of portraits and expectation, one thing became painfully clear. Nothing inside the royal family would ever be the same again. Inside the Global Council's secret decision. The announcement may have shocked the world, but inside the highest levels of the monarchy, it had been brewing for months. Behind the thick velvet curtains and locked doors of the Global Royal Council, a different conversation had been unfolding quietly, cautiously, and far from the public eye. It wasn't just about titles or tradition, it was about survival. Across the Commonwealth, leaders were growing restless. Trust in the monarchy was fading, especially among younger generations and former colonies. Some questioned the very purpose of continuing the crown's symbolic presence. A few had even considered breaking ties entirely. It was during these delicate discussions that Catherine's name began to surface. Council members from Canada, Australia, and Barbados reportedly expressed concerns about Camilla's ability to unite a rapidly changing global audience. Her connection to the monarchy was rooted in controversy, not legacy. Her presence didn't inspire unity. It reopened old wounds. One delegate reportedly said during a closed-door session, "We don't need tradition. We need trust." and only one woman in that family has it. That woman was Catherine, Princess of Wales. What started as cautious praise turned into serious debate. Was it possible to reshape the line of perception without causing chaos? Could the crown reposition itself without outright removing Camilla? The answer arrived in the form of a private file, Operation Safeguard. A confidential strategy drafted by royal advisors, marked with coded phrases like restoring confidence, modern succession optics, and most notably, safeguarding legacy beyond reign. Inside that file was a recommendation. Catherine should be publicly recognized as the future queen, not just by title, but by vision. This would give the public and the world a sense of clarity, security, and hope. King Charles, initially hesitant, eventually agreed. Sources say it was one of the hardest decisions of his reign. But faced with growing pressure, his duty to the crown outweighed his personal loyalties. Camilla was not part of these talks, and that was no accident. Camilla's private collapse. The moment the event ended, Camilla disappeared from sight. She didn't attend the reception. She didn't return to the royal table. She was quietly escorted through a side corridor, away from cameras, through the servants' wing of Buckingham Palace, where the press would never think to look. There, behind closed doors, she broke down. One staffer, who had served the palace for over 20 years, later described it simply. It wasn't crying. It was collapse. Inside her private quarters, Camilla reportedly fell into a chair, still in her ceremonial dress, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The sobs came in waves, loud, guttural, raw. Decades of survival, ambition, and silent endurance crumbled in one night. She had endured public hatred, tabloid humiliation, and the long, painful road from mistress to queen consort. She had outlasted scandal. She had stayed quiet when it counted. And in her mind, she had finally earned her place. Until it was taken away, on live broadcast, in front of the entire world. Inside the room, only 2 aides remained. One stood back. The other knelt beside her and whispered softly. Camilla didn't speak. She couldn't. She simply shook her head, over and over again, as if trying to erase what she had just witnessed. Later that evening, palace staff reported hearing muffled crying through the halls. The Queen's wing remained dark. Doors stayed shut. No one dared disturb her. To the public, it looked like Camilla had simply retreated, that she was taking space, perhaps tending to royal business in private. But to those within the walls of the palace, her absence spoke volumes. Her tears weren't just about status or titles. They were about being left out, about watching the man she loved choose duty over devotion, about realizing that no matter how hard she had tried, she would never be the people's queen. And perhaps, deep down, she always knew. But until that moment, she had never heard it declared, so publicly, so clearly, and so finally. That night, Camilla didn't lose a crown. She lost her place in history. King Charles's silent struggle. Behind the powerful words and formal declarations, King Charles was unraveling. To the public, he stood composed as ever, shoulders squared, voice steady, regal in bearing. But those closest to him saw the truth. He was conflicted, exhausted, and quietly breaking. Privately, he had signed off on the council's recommendation. He had read every line of Operation Safeguard, every warning about public sentiment, every strategic note about the monarchy's dwindling influence. He understood the risk of doing nothing, but even with full knowledge and consent, he hadn't prepared himself for the fallout. especially from Camilla. Insiders say Charles agonized over the decision. For weeks, he walked the palace gardens alone, often late at night. He met with aides, lawyers, constitutional experts, asking the same questions again and again. Is this necessary? Is there no other way? Every answer brought him back to the same truth. Catherine was the future. Camilla was the past. He tried to soften the blow. He reportedly wrote Camilla a personal letter days before the council meeting, trying to explain. He told her it wasn't a rejection. It was about safeguarding the crown's long-term survival. But she never responded. In the hours after the public declaration, Charles remained stone-faced. But when he returned to his private quarters, palace aides say he was unusually quiet, pale, distant. He asked for no press briefings, no photos, no official portraits, and he said only one thing aloud that night as he sat in silence near the fireplace, his crown polished and waiting on a velvet stand across the room. "I never meant to hurt her." Those words weren't meant for anyone, but they were overheard and passed on. To the world, he was a monarch making a wise, forward-thinking choice. But behind palace doors, he was a man torn between his heart and his throne. And as his wife cried behind closed doors and his daughter-in-law quietly accepted the weight of the realm, Charles faced the one thing no crown can shield him from: consequences. Catherine's burden of destiny. She didn't ask for this. As the headlines exploded and the world turned its eyes to her, Catherine, Princess of Wales, remained silent. That night, after the speech, she returned to Kensington Palace and immediately called her mother. According to a source close to the family, her voice trembled, not from excitement, but from overwhelm. "I never asked for this," she whispered. And she hadn't. Catherine had always been a loyal consort, never demanding attention, never stepping beyond her place. She supported William, raised her children, and carried out engagements with dignity. But now, everything had changed. Her name was being shouted by crowds outside the palace gates. Social media lit up with hashtags like Queen Catherine and Monarch of the People. World leaders were issuing statements praising her calm, her grace, her leadership. But inside, Catherine was terrified. She knew what came with the crown: the scrutiny, the expectations, the endless performance of strength. And more than that, she knew what it meant for her children, for her privacy, for the small, quiet world she had fought to protect. Still, she showed no cracks. The next morning, dressed in a muted navy coat dress and pearl earrings, she stepped out for a scheduled engagement, unshaken, smiling, poised. She shook hands, she met with nurses, she held the hand of a cancer survivor and looked her directly in the eye. "You're braver than you know," she said softly. The woman responded, "So are you." That night, in a rare private moment with William, she admitted her fear. She wasn't scared of duty. She was scared of losing herself to it. William reportedly held her hand and said just one thing: "Whatever comes next, you don't face it alone." But even as she leaned on him, she stood taller. Because Catherine understood something no one else had to say aloud. This was no longer about choice. It was destiny, and it had arrived whether she was ready or not. But as history has often shown, the greatest queens are not born. They are built in moments exactly like this. Princess Anne steps in. When the palace fell silent, Princess Anne spoke. In a family known for caution and quiet diplomacy, Anne had always been the one who said what others wouldn't. She had survived the system by obeying its rules. while never pretending to love them. Now, in the middle of a storm tearing through the monarchy, she stepped forward not as a sister-in-law or aunt, but as the monarchy's unofficial enforcer. In a series of closed-door meetings held just hours after Camilla's breakdown, Anne took charge of what aides called damage control. Her stance was calm but sharp. She wasn't interested in emotional fallout. She was focused on preserving the institution. "This isn't betrayal," she told senior staff. "It's survival." That line set the tone for the days that followed. Anne refused to let the palace spiral into chaos. She coordinated with private secretaries, arranged press-holding statements, and even advised William to hold off on any joint appearances with Catherine until the dust settled. Every move was calculated, every word deliberate. But it was her public statement that changed everything. Standing before cameras after a charity event in Wiltshire, Anne broke protocol. A reporter shouted, "Do you support the Princess of Wales being named future queen?" Anne paused, then said clearly, "She represents the values our mother upheld. Quiet strength, service before self. Yes, I support her." Those few words spread like wildfire. Support from Princess Anne wasn't just rare. It was final. If Anne backed you, you were legitimate. Period. Inside the palace, the weight of those words hit Camilla harder than any headline. She and Anne had once shared a quiet alliance, bound by their outsider status, their commitment to duty, and the understanding that neither of them was born for the spotlight. But now, Anne had chosen, and she had not chosen Camilla. Catherine, though, remained respectful and silent. She reportedly sent Anne a handwritten note the next morning, thanking her for the support. Anne never replied. She didn't need to. Her loyalty had already been made clear, not to any one woman, but to the survival of the crown itself. The showdown at Windsor Castle. It happened 3 days later, behind the ivy-covered stone walls of Windsor Castle. A private family dinner had been called, an attempt to ease tensions, reset appearances, and put on a united front. But by the time dessert had been cleared, the atmosphere had turned electric. According to a senior aide, Camilla requested a private moment with Catherine. What followed was not a conversation. It was a confrontation. Camilla's words came fast and sharp. She accused Catherine of plotting behind her back, of allowing the council to move forward without warning, of stealing something she had waited her whole life to wear. "You smiled while they erased me," she said. "You watched while they crowned you." Catherine didn't flinch. She responded quietly, denying the accusations. Her voice didn't rise. Her body didn't tense. She stood still, poised, unshaken. "I didn't ask for this," she said, "but I won't run from it either." Camilla's anger turned into visible distress. Her voice cracked. Her fists clenched. She paced across the floor, emotions spiraling into disbelief and pain. Then the door creaked open. Princess Anne stepped in. The room froze. She walked in slowly, looked at both women, and spoke with the firm clarity of someone who had seen the monarchy bend and break. "This crown doesn't belong to any one of us," she said. "It belongs to the people, and they've already chosen." The silence that followed was absolute. Camilla turned away, tears welling again, but this time she didn't fight them. Catherine gave a single nod, then quietly left the room. Anne remained behind, watching Camilla with the same expression she wore in war zones and memorials, one of duty over emotion. Later, a palace aide would whisper, "That night, the power shifted, for good." the people's verdict. As tensions simmered behind palace walls, the public had already made their choice. Outside Kensington Palace, crowds gathered, waving flags, holding signs, and chanting a name that echoed louder than any title. Catherine, our queen! For the first time in years, the mood outside the royal estate wasn't tense or divided. It was electric. Men and women of all ages lined the gates, not in protest, but in celebration. Some wept. Others brought handwritten letters. The emotional surge was immediate, and it was global. Across the Commonwealth, the media wasted no time. The Sydney Herald called her the monarch of the modern age. The Times declared, "The Crown has spoken, and it speaks through the people." In Canada, a news anchor closed a segment by simply stating, "The Queen the world waited for is here." Camilla's silence only fueled the shift. She was notably absent from multiple royal engagements in the days that followed, prompting speculation and then confirmation. A palace statement cited private reflection, but sources close to the family admitted she was grieving her public role. And yet, in her absence, something unexpected happened. Catherine rose even higher. Letters flooded her office, thousands of them, from teachers, nurses, survivors, single mothers, cancer patients, veterans. People who had never written to the monarchy before were now pouring out their hearts to the woman they saw as not just royalty, but real. One letter, handwritten by an 11-year-old from Birmingham, simply read, "Dear Princess Catherine, I want to be strong like you when I grow up." It was placed on Catherine's desk the morning after the Windsor confrontation. She reportedly sat in silence for nearly 5 minutes, reading it over and over before whispering just 2 words: "For them." Inside the palace, staff began quietly referring to her as the People's Queen. It wasn't official. It didn't need to be. The public had made its decision, long before the crown could catch up. The new queen in waiting. 2 weeks later, the Royal Council reconvened, this time behind closed doors at St. James's Palace. The room was smaller, quieter, but the moment would prove just as historic. At exactly 11 a.m., Catherine entered the chamber. Gone were the nerves, the weight, the shadow of Camilla's grief. She wore a simple cream suit, no tiara, no royal sash, just a silver brooch, Queen Elizabeth's favorite thistle, pinned delicately above her heart. She stood before the council not as a consort, but as a woman who had walked through fire and stayed standing. Her voice, when it came, was clear and full of emotion. "If I am to serve, let it be in service, not in supremacy. Let this crown be carried not above the people, but among them." The chamber stood still. A few wiped their eyes. A judge from New Zealand nodded solemnly. Even the Queen's loyal critics, those who once doubted her place, remained silent. King Charles was there too, seated off to the side. He didn't speak, but those who saw him said his expression held a bittersweet truth. There was pride, yes, but also pain. He had secured his legacy, but at the cost of a woman he loved. Still, as he watched Catherine step into the center of the room, he knew this was the only way forward. Catherine's acceptance was brief, humble, and flawless. The council formally acknowledged her status as Queen in Waiting, a title now etched into history, and as she left the chamber, passing through the arched stone corridor, lined with centuries of portraits, one moment said more than any decree. Camilla, standing in the shadows, nodded once. No words, no smile, just surrender. Outside, church bells rang, news alerts buzzed, and across the world, Millions watched the footage play out in real time, eyes wide, hands over hearts. In that moment, the monarchy wasn't just surviving. It was transforming. And at the center of it all stood Catherine, our queen, not crowned by ceremony but chosen by history. Camilla's tears told the story. Her reign ended before it truly began. Charles made his choice, and the world followed. With dignity and quiet strength, Catherine stepped into destiny. No crown yet rests on her head, but in the eyes of millions, she's already earned the only title that matters: Queen.